My name is Sarah Juliet Loro. I'm a professor in the Department of English and Writing, and this speaker series is funded by the Department of English and the Honors Program, so we're very thankful to both of those programs for their help with this event. This is the first event of the school year, and we'll have another one in spring semester. I'm really very happy to be introducing Dr. Peter Coviello. He's so popular that when USF found out we were bringing him, they were like, oh, we want to do something with him too. So they kind of copied us and had him over there to their campus yesterday. Let me tell you a little bit about Peter Coviello before I turn things over to him today. So he is a professor of English at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where he specializes in American literature and queer studies. He has written about queer childhood, Mormon polygamy, the history of sexuality, step-parenthood, Justin Bieber, Walt Whitman, and whenever he's had occasion to, Prince. He's the author of several books. His book from 2013, which is called Tomorrow's Parties, Sex and the Untimely in 19th-Century America, was a finalist for a Lambda Award in LGBT Studies. The most recent book is, and what he's going to read from today, is Long Players, a love story in 18 songs, which is out now from Penguin, and which we have some copies for sale after the talk. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Peter Coviello.
So years ago, when I was applying for a job, and you have to give a talk when you apply for a job, and I was applying for a job in Chicago. Some of you have been to Chicago, and it was in February, and it was 15 below zero. And like the talk was at 4 o'clock, just like this is. And then at like 10 o'clock in the morning, the university was like, no one is allowed to be on campus after 4 o'clock because it's too cold and you might die. So I was like, that's intense. And so when everybody came, I got to say, thank you for coming to my talk and risking your death. And I never thought I'd get to say that again, but look, here you are. Like I was just on a balcony 20 minutes ago and like looking at my phone, and I was, oh, there's a tornado, please take shelter. So I didn't think anybody would come out. So I appreciate an awful lot that you're here. I especially want to thank Professor Loro for bringing me here. Also my friend Professor Brian Connolly who's going to come. I'm just very honored and happy to be here and happy to get to talk to you. I'm going to read two little things from this book that I wrote that I should probably tell you about before starting reading. So like I'm a professor, you know, like I write books about Herman Melville or Emily Dickinson or whatever. I write sort of academic books. But then over a number of years, and we could talk about this, I started writing these other sorts of things, you know, that were about like pop songs that I liked, but also were about my life, and were about my stepdaughters who, when I was no longer married, were my ex-stepdaughters. I started writing this whole other way, and I eventually just wrote a whole book that was in this other way. So this is that book. This is a book that I guess you have to call a memoir, though that word gives me kind of hives. But nevertheless. So, yeah, and it's a story about a guy. When we meet him, he's kind of young. He's a little stupid. He's not like an evil-hearted guy. He's just not as smart as he might be. And he falls crazy in love with somebody and gets married. And she has 2 little girls, and he becomes a stepfather. And then things kind of go bad. And it's the story of how you live in the aftermath or something like that. And most of it has to do with keeping yourself together by loving things like songs. So that's what the book is about. And I'm going to start kind of at the beginning. And then I'm going to read a whole chapter about a band that I'm pretty sure Professor Lara thinks none of you will have heard of.
That's true.
I don't know. All right. This is how the book begins. It's from chapter 1. It's called Be Still for a Second. So, on the way to what would prove to be the last of these, driving with Ebony up the coast of Maine toward an anniversary getaway, I found myself crying. This was not unusual. I had spent by then nearly 2 decades shedding sudden tears over pop songs. In my 20s, in the isolation of graduate school, this happened most often in the shower. I'd have some rusted out boombox perched on a towel rack and be listening for the 4th or 8th or 18th time to a mixtape, hoping in this way to steel myself against the unforeseen inanities of the academic day, and then some track would come abruptly to life,
deliver its quick little knife to the heart. Maybe I'd be missing someone. Maybe the key change in a Jawbreaker song would unlock from its chamber some minor unforgotten sorrow, or maybe the inclusion of a Cheap Trick song, or of Going to California, or of Theodore Rutke reading A Rouse for Stevens as a poem. These are the kinds of things you can put on mixes for your friends in grad school. Maybe the inclusion of any of these things would set off a micro burst of happiness, reminding me of the nearness to my life, even of people no longer close by, and so I would find myself, half shampooed, one eye asquint with the sting of soap, enjoying a brief surrender to tearfulness. I will not lie to you and say that this ritual diminished much in frequency as the waters of adulthood began more and more to rise around me in the shower, on subways, and most especially in the car, the private theater of emotional extravagance that is the car. The strange visitations continued. I had no objection to them. Even at my most sedate, I have always tended toward what you might call an effusiveness that, at least in the metrics of the waspy New England where I came eventually to reside, was forever being read back to me as something between extravagant and alarming. How surprising was it that a certain vulgar loudness, which I prefer to call enthusiasm, would have as its counterpart an easy susceptibility to watery eyes, a hitch in the breath. The way I looked at it, Freud was right. People were, in the tumult of their emotional lives, far, far too much for themselves. There would always be more entailed in being a person. More conflict, more fear, more desire, more joy, more sorrow, than you could ever quite wrestle into stasis or unruffled serenity. Because of what being a person is, which is conflictual, overabundant, you'd always be in some real sense as a kind of mystery, even to yourself. So if pop songs manage to open this little space inside you where you might actually stand for a moment in the presence of some of your more occult and turbulent emotions without being just pulverized by them, then God bless pop songs, was my feeling. As a mode of contact between you and your sharper conflicts, your impermissible excesses, you could do a lot worse. So my mistiness that early morning in the high flower of midsummer was really just a part of the texture of things. We were listening to the anniversary mix I'd made for her. I had made her an anniversary mix. I was quite entirely that person. And had come to a song that all of a sudden seemed to distill into shimmering clarity the whole atmosphere of our busy, besotted, married people happiness. I can remember looking across at her as I drove, at her half smile, and her legs bared for summer, and in an unsteady voice saying something like, I want this all to go much, much slower. That song was called The Permanent Story. It was from a record called Boxer, and it was by a band called The National. I'm sorry to say things don't really work out very well for that couple. And in the next couple pages, things go very badly indeed. And that young narrator who you just met finds himself ejected from the life that he really loved. You know, he's a young guy, and he's figuring out how to be like a step-parent. He doesn't know anything about little girls. He has 2 little girls, and he's starting to do that, and then suddenly that's over. And he does the thing that you would expect, which is that he has like protracted several years long breakdown, and he tries to figure out what's going to tether him back to the world, and especially tether him back to these 2 little girls who had been his family and were his family. So that's sort of the story the book tells. I'm going to do something I haven't done before. I'm going to read you a whole chapter from in the midst of a period of flailing about madly. And I'm going to read this chapter in part because it's about this band called Fugazi, who, again, Professor Laura says no one here will know about. It's awesome. There's a lot of blank, like.
Yeah, I told you.
And I'm both exactly all the old people in the room are going. It's about not liking Fugazi, who are like a very important band if you're 45. Like if you're a hardcore kid, they're very important. But it's mostly about like loving the people you love by agreeing and disagreeing about the things they like. That's what it's mostly about. So this is a chapter that happens after the person who is me has been left very abruptly by the person who's married to, and it's just a terrible wreck. It's not a particularly good time. and a couple of her friends come out to visit him. And so that's what this chapter is. It's called The Next Person I Meet. It's chapter 6. Sandy and Elena have arrived in Maine. I lived in Maine, I should say. Sandy and Elena have arrived in Maine like magi. They have come bearing gifts. There are oranges in a netted bag, chocolates, a book, provisions for survival in the aftermath of disaster. In the back of the car, Sandy is fumbling with something else, something unwieldy. He has brought with him CDs, a whole stack. It is a gift, he says. It is for me. He tells me it is a mix of songs, and I swear to you, it is the most prodigious thing of its kind that I have ever seen. And listen, I fucking know for mixes. I have made them in delight and sorrow and remembrance and expectation. I have made them for lovers, for friends, more lately for children. Years before, I scored the entirety of our wedding day, 5 hours of music plotted into meticulous arcs and crescendos, having put it all together the only way you could in those days, which was song by song on a dual CD burner located at the college radio station, which I monopolized over the course of one obsessive-compulsive weekend without shame or apology. That's true. When you wanted to burn CDs, you needed 2 CD burners, and there was usually 1 per college campus, which was like 10 years ago. But this is something else entirely. It is a mix like no others. It is, to begin with, 9 CDs long. We put it on as we drive, and immediately there comes a blast of pop rock voices stacked and chorusing, and out of the high gloss production, one crystalline tenor steps to the front. Starting now, I'm starting over, he sings, leading a band I've never heard of, and then, in a high soprano, I'm gonna sleep with the next person I meet. It's a strong opening. The recent months before Sandy and Elena's day trip have been eventful. I have begun moving out of my house, my so cherished little house, which for a purely horrific few weeks, Ebony and I have conspired to share. I have found too, quite by accident, that in those times when I have not been resident there, Ebony's new lover has been. A longtime neighbor and colleague at the college tells me this one early morning over coffee, as though it were something I must surely have known. The look on her face when she realizes her error stays with me as an image of blank, confounded pity. Later, in a memorable day of hallucinatory ghastliness, Lucy, the oldest of my stepdaughters, who's now 11, Lucy asks me if I'll be at the all-campus picnic. It is the kind of event little places, such as the college, like to throw for employees and their families once the students have cleared out and the slower routines of summer have begun to take hold. I go in the hopes of catching up a bit with Lucy, having seen so much less of the girls in the previous months. It baffles my heart, this sudden yawning absence, like an unworkable puzzle, a bewilderment of sorrow. When we talk to one another on the phone, Lucy and Amelia and I, Amelia is my younger sister. When we talk on the phone, Lucy and Amelia and I, we talk only of ordinary things. How was school, I say. Who did you see today? What did you wear today? Nothing else seems speakable. But I am all in knots. What will become of us now? What will we be for one another now? It feels when we talk like we are walking together very deliberately along the edges of something terrible. I'm sorry. I want to say, girls, I am so sorry again and again and again. I wonder if I will ever reach the end of my impulse to apologize. Of course, I say, sweetie, when Lucy asks me if I'll be at the all-campus picnic. I'll find you there. In the blue sea-salted light of a perfect Maine day, I see Lucy. We hug and we talk a little and we tell some old jokes. She is so plainly being sweet with me and in a way that just breaks your heart careful. And then, in the pre-adolescent style, she is off into the crowd. The fact of the presence of her ordinary nearness buzzes through me for a moment. I see, too, every man, woman, and child I know at this little college where my ex-wife and I both work.
To many, though not all of whom, news of this affair/breakup has begun to arrive. I also see Ebony. She is there very much in the company of the man for whom she has left me. He is also an employee and has as much right to be there as anybody. And she is comporting herself on the day among all the people we have lived with and entertained and grown older beside with an edge of combativeness that in some other context I might find admirable, if only for its steely audacity. Fuck each and every one of you provincial busybodies, her affect seems to say. Fuck you if you want me cringing and ashamed. Alas, I don't have much heart for admiration. Two friends flank me shoulder to shoulder as I stand there in exposed imbecile paralysis. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Alan. And one of them leans over to me and says, hey, everything's gonna be okay. Later, once it feels safe to move and I am walking through the dispersing crowds, a woman whose face is familiar in a vague way, I will subsequently realize she works in HR, approaches me. Listen, we don't know each other, she says, but that was bullshit. Sheepish, I say thank you and tell her I am sorry. And yet I find I am not, as you think I'd have the good sense to be, humiliated, though I am learning what it is to be a central player in that dismalest of human genres, the small town scandal. And though my role there is to be the dupe or the man who was replaced, still, as it turns out, I don't have much room in me to fear the leering gaze of the small public world or to feel undone by anyone's knowledge, however detailed, of what has happened. I am sufficiently undone already. Though the transparency of this undoing isn't the best thing about it, as pains go, that one feels small indeed. Next to the dumb incomprehensibility of what has happened and of what is yet to happen, humiliation hardly registers. My friend Meredith, you see, has taken me to a lawyer, and the first words out of his mouth were these: there is nothing I can do for you with respect to those girls. Humiliation inside this astonishing new world of facts to be faced is barely a thing you notice. Anyway, I must be walking around with an aspect especially pathetic because everybody is being gracious and decorous and kind. One desultory day, I find a card under my office door. It is from my friend and sometimes co-teacher, Elizabeth, one of the true stars of our at-home dance parties, who in her day-lit guise, gifted scholar, unflappable colleague, patient mother of three, might not strike you as the guest likeliest to stay till 3 a.m. out dancing the junior faculty boys to Prince jams in the mid-'80s. Without quite being confessionally intimate, we are good friends, dear to each other, I would say, and I admire her so much. Dear Pete, her card says, I don't know that I've ever known a husband more obviously in love with his wife than you. I do not know what to say. I'm so sorry. Call me if you need anything. It breaks me up. I keep the card. I do not call. So it is into this cheerful environment, by then tinted a few shades darker, that Sandy and Elena have made their pilgrimage. It is pure mercy. I was supposed to have gone down to Providence to stay with them for the upcoming 4th of July weekend, but no. After another night of sleeplessness at my friend's house, what I'm saying, devoted hour by hour to recrimination and elaborate self-torment, and then another fucking morning of rolling panic attacks, I come to the unhappy conclusion that I wasn't going anywhere. I looked at my shaking hands, and some spasm of self-preservative instinct spoke through me. It said, you should not drive a car. And so they drove up, despite the fact that they can't stay the night. They are driving 3 hours one way and 3 hours straight back. They have come to find me. Even through the awful myopia of my sorrow, I know they have done this for me. Disrupted the flow of their own clamoring lives in the same spirit of care that would motivate you to make a mix that lasts better than 10 hours. They arrive, and I feel such a surge of hapless, grateful love for them that I recommence doing exactly what I've been doing all morning, which is crying. But now it's crossed with sputtering laughter. Even my untiring tearfulness seems for a moment not without its comic dimensions. We park the car and walk about, and as we stroll around the holiday empty campus, I can feel an unclenching. And yet, behind the relief and the gratitude, there is, I know, something else, ugly and craven. I'm a little scared of them. I have a sense of the person they know me to be, and I have a sense that that person, who we all of us liked pretty well, is gone. These past weeks have been eventful. There are things that have happened, broken turns of mind that have found me, things I have thought to do, things I have almost done, that I do not comprehend, and for which I will have no words for years. It all puts an edge of nervousness in my throat. But this is pure manic insanity, that there is not the least thing to be disquieted by in the company of these people, matters considerably less than we hope it would. With a longing that pierces me, I wish only to sink into the old steadying familiarities. Of these we have so many, between Sandy and me, for instance. The primary mode of attachment has long been a kind of genial combat, an unceasing disputatiousness, vehement and mostly unserious, except when, contrarily, entirely fucking serious. One particular fight has been crackling between us for decades, a nourishing little passage of oft-returned to inanity. Sandy, who had grown up in and around the legendary punk and hardcore scenes of mid-80s Washington, D.C., loved Fugazi. And my God, were they not my thing? And that really was the whole of it. I like this band, yes, but I do not. The purest imaginable form, really, of stupid fighting about useless things. But if this had given us a way to calibrate to the last decimal our micro differences of tuning, it had also, this dumb fighting, become for us one of the well springs of a closeness that had outlasted adolescence and was now charting its way through the heavier weather of adulthood. As I waited for them to arrive all the shaking morning, I'd been thinking of that closeness, my closeness with Sandy, playing all up and down the scales of memory, years and years before, somewhere in the postgraduate mid-90s, Sandy and I had ventured across the country together, Chicago to San Francisco in his shitty, sputtering Honda hatchback. And it was there that the rituals of this, our ever-renewed dispute, attained what was probably their most ludicrous extended form. I mean, it carried on more or less uninterruptedly for days, just fighting about Fugazi. When in later years I would think of the landscapes of the West, the dissolving sightlines of Nebraska, the brick reds of Arizona, the lunar barrenness of Death Valley, through which Sandy insisted we drive in the high sun afternoon of a day in late fucking August. It was 127 degrees, I saw the sign, it was 127 degrees. When I would think of these things, the sound of some long ago Fugazi track would come chainsawing into consciousness. When they find our whited bones by the scuttled car, I said to him, who will know to blame motherfucking Fugazi? All through our days on the road, rattling along in his little silver Honda, taking any occasion to fall back to fighting, road directions, motel choices, lunch, whatever. One record had formed a kind of demilitarized zone between us. We've listened more times than I can count to 24-hour revenge therapy, a newish release by a San Francisco band called Jawbreaker, which I will tell you is a great, if also in retrospect, truly hilarious artifact of the early middle 90s. Oh, the emo kid anguish, so serious, so emotional. It is a record you could aptly describe as a portrait of the young punk discovering breakups are terrible. Somewhere out in the wilds of Clintonian America, you could surely have found a car full of boys capable of resisting the charms of a record alternating between like anthemic scene critiques and tracks with names like Do You Still Hate Me? God, that record's good. Sandy's overheating hatchback did not contain those boys. We'd listen again and again and laugh a little at the airlessness of the singer's stunned heartbreak. Jesus, I can remember Sandy saying at some point, Blake, the singer, Blake is for real hating it. After which interval we would return to fighting about Fugazi. As revelatory as it is to love something in common with someone, a book, a song, a child, to love a person with whom you differ passionately and on matters of real consequence to you both can be its own kind of edifying and its own kind of joyful. I knew bands had given Sandy something richer to him than an aesthetic, the memory of some good shows. They had given him a stance toward life, one marked by stridency and oppositional devotion, is why he liked Fugazi. Whereas I found it myself an instinct to insist on pleasure, on the forth and breadth of its revelations, which certain kinds of dudes, and there was never any shortage of such dudes, tended to dismiss as cheap and frivolous. He was a kind of conscience to me, and I had probably been one for him. Boys, you will have noticed, will create rituals of fantastic intricacy to say simple things. Things like, you are my friend, and it appears that I have come to love you. Or, as the case may be, I can't do this. Or, please help me. Tell me what's happening, Elon is saying. I want to know all the things. We are sitting in front of a bench. We are sitting on a bench in front of a building of stately red brick, ivy curling up its sides, the whole thing. A gold-green quad bisected by walking paths that a few months earlier would have been dense with fleeced-up college kids lies before us as still and tranquil as an alumni magazine photograph. Whatever fears I'm dragging around with me and out into this New England collegiate idyll, Elena has taken in hand and with her especially fierce style of care sought to neutralize them. She is, Elena, a neuroscientist by training, and her mind is a razored and agile thing. She does not have a lot of patience for indirection or cant. I do not have sisters, but her presence makes me wish that I did. Her anger on my behalf, though it is not something I find I can much participate in, is nevertheless comforting to be near. It is incandescent, a Roman candle lit and burning. She's standing in front of me now, pacing back and forth, in front of the bench where Sandy sits beside me. Dude, she is saying, the fuck? Two unlikely things are about to transpire. Out of the stillness of the scene-set landscape, a figure emerges from one of the buildings to our left. This is the Art Museum, gloriously renovated, the plinth where Sandy and Elena will remember as the scene of my wedding reception today, appearing denuded of the clusters of students usually we found draping themselves over its railings and across its stone steps. The figure, not quite 100 yards away and cutting a perfect line left to right across our field of vision, has foppishly lank hair, jeans cuffed up high, a messenger bag on his shoulder. He may or may not notice us. He is walking deliberately, but without hurry. It's him, of course. It's him, I say rigidly, and the talk goes dry. We are frozen for a moment, the three of us, into a blank tableau. And somehow his presence there, as if conjured by evil magic, becomes for me something weirdly monumental. Sandy and Elena are seeing this too, which means he cannot be mere hallucination. And so, suddenly, somehow, the reality of him blazes into furious clarity. Here is this person, and whatever his absurdity, and he is, I'm sorry, a high piece of human ridiculousness. He is real. He is real. He will speak to Ebony shortly, and he is real. He will be in the house I made with her, as will the girls, and it will be for all the world as though I was never there. He walks along, becoming a truth less conjectural second by second, and as he does, I feel my own substantiality, the once comprehensive fact of myself, pouring itself out of me. I am vanishing. I feel it. When he has passed far enough along to have his back to us, I start to sob again, but this time in deadly earnest, and I do not know that I will ever stop. And then the second thing happens. Elena has her arms around me. She's holding me and rocking me and talking to me. Hey, she is saying, hey there. Hey, fuck that guy. That guy? Fuck that guy. And it's Sandy who's pacing in front of us. When he turns back to us, his face is fixed and his eyes are burning. It is a look I recognize, mostly from the more colliding moments of our years of dumb fighting, though it is drained now of any trace of unseriousness. He plants himself directly in front of me. I need you to stop, he says. I look at him. God, Sandy, I really do love him, but I can't stop. He says, I need you to stop this. And again, you need to stop. I do not stop. And then, this is not you. I'm just staring at him. This is not you. Listen, I know who you are. I've known you 20 fucking years. She does not listen. She does not get to say who you are. He straightens up and then leans back toward me. Listening. Stop. Listening. I know who you are. Elin knows who you are. And this is not you. I sit there transfixed. In the weeks and months ahead, I will replay this scene in memory dozens, hundreds of times. Listen to me, man. This is not you. Do you hear me? This is not you. I can't say just what it is that happens, but something small in me clicks. I do not stop crying, not just then, but eventually I do. We continue walking, and later go out to an early dinner. Elena holds my hand for most of it, and Sandy says it again, this time in a lobster shack beside a main cove with early bird diners crowded around us. No more crying every day. Enough. This isn't you. We know who you are. A strange but true fact. This is the last day that finds me crying, morning, noon, and night. On Sandy's epic mix, I will later discover there are virtually no songs from our shared past. No Nation of Ulysses deep cuts. No slits from the backup in the room like, yeah. No slant 6 B-sides. There is no Fugazi. There's one track that catches me on first listen. And it's this winning power ballady number featuring a scratchy-throated dude singing about being in love, being like, really in love. And sure enough, through the swift magic of the internet, I come to find that the band is called Jets to Brazil, and the singer is none other than Blake. Blake from Jawbreaker, whose bygone punk rock heartbreak had evidently resolved itself into something a good deal cheerier. I can't quite figure the valence of its inclusion here, a suggestion that my life, like Blake's, will arc toward love, or a funny little suggestion, I mean, there are fucking strings in this song, that Jesus, we are now well and truly middle-aged. Mostly, I just love that it's there. Like most everything else that ripples through the hours and hours of sound, it speaks in the voice of an improbable, undefeated optimism. Sandy and Elena, I think, know from gifts. Unable to restore to me the things I have understood myself to have lost irrevocably, my marriage, my stepdaughters, romance, a whole habitable future, they have started with something smaller and nearer. They have started with songs. This is fortunate for me, because things soon turn curiouser.
Why don't we stop there? I'm sorry, young people, that was really truly dedicated to the people listening to Fugazi in 1986. But nevertheless.
Do we have questions? We can do a few questions from the audience. I can field one or two.
Questions, denunciations. This is a good time for that also. Okay, Jai.
Thank you for that, Peter. That was stunning.
Thank you.
And your voice is so electric. It's hard to imagine that not spilling over into your critical prose in some way. So tell us a little about what hat you put on when you're doing creative work, what hat you put on. Are they basically the same athlete?
That's a wonderful question. So the question is about like, what's it like writing? This is not a critical piece of work, obviously. I'd say that like when I started reading this, I'd been reading this at bookstores, and people would be like, "So are you done writing critical books?" I'd be like, "No, I still like writing critical books." And I ended up trying to say something like the hard thing about writing, as some of you will surely know, is that like you're trying to sound like yourself, and that you discover takes like 10 or 20 years to figure out how to do in any like good way. And so this sounds like me talking to someone in a, I'm sorry, it's swear, there's so much swearing. But like, you know, I should have said that in advance, there's a lot of swearing. But it's like talking to your friends in a bar or out to dinner or something like that. And when you're writing a scholarly book, you're talking like yourself in the classroom or at a podium, trying to make the most complex argument that you can. So you still want to sound like you, but you're you in a different room. You're you adhering to a whole different set of conventions. And so the task is still sort of the same, sound like you. And this is more like how you might sound in a letter, in that old-timey genre of a letter. But yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. What else did I tell you? Do you want to know more about Fugazi? No, truly, you can ask. It's cool.
It's not about Fugazi. But I was just wondering, how did you decide which names to change and which names not to change? Because Sandy is Sandy, right?
I know, this is also, yeah, Professor Laura knows, like, Sandy and Elon are Sandy and Elon. And I was like, I can't, whatever.
Okay.
You guys are, so like, some of the people's names are changed, some are not.
Just randomly?
Well, just randomly, like, there's not the, you know, those are not the names of the people I was married to.
Concern when you write a memoir?
There are legal concerns when you write a memoir. This is like, so tell us about that. So like, when you write a book, you know, it's read by editors and whatever like that. And I was like, I'm used to that, and the editors tell you what's wrong, and you write it again. And this book was read by more lawyers than it was editors. Like, because you can't be libeling people. It doesn't matter if you change their name, so you can't be saying things that are not true. And they didn't change anything, but I was like, whoa. I got like line edited by a team of lawyers, you know? That's never happened to me before. You write about like, you know, you write about Emily Dickinson, people don't do that. You write about people's lives, you do, which is more than fair and more than reasonable. But yeah, the girls' names I kicked around for a long time. They're just the same syllables, they're the same metrics. Yeah, for Lucy and Amelia, there are some names I like. What else might I tell you? Yeah.
So what made you change from what to other stuff?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh yeah, what made you change your writing style from academic books to other stuff?
That's a great question. The question is like, what made you change from just writing academic to other ones? Well, honestly, a couple things I guess I'd say. Like from forever, the reason I learned, the way I learned how to get into like wanting to spend my life with books and think about 19th century America stuff was honestly because when I was young, when I was your age, I kind of just fell in love with things like books and records. But I fell in love with them totally together, you know what I mean? Which is also to say, like, I fell in love with the people that I was talking about them with. And so a part of me had always said, like, one day write about that. You know, like the kind of pledge you make to yourself. But then you're in your life and you're writing, and then you don't want to write about it terribly. So it took me a long time to not write badly. Well, it's still taking me a long time to not write badly. We'll see how it goes. But then, you know, I got older and I started writing about these things, and I realized I had this particular thing I was trying to figure out. Like, I used to be just a guy, and then I was a step-parent, which is weird, and then I was an ex-step-parent. And I had to just figure that out. Like, how does, you know what I mean? Like, you improvise that, and it just became clear to me that, like, songs were a big part of how the girls and I held ourselves together and made up whatever the thing we were going to do. And so I was writing little pieces about that, like little essays, like 3,000 or 4,000 word essays. And then I was writing a lot of them. And yeah, and somebody suggested, like, hey man, that should be a different kind of book. And then weirdly got an agent, and the agent was like, I don't want a book of essays. Anybody can write essays. You know how to write essays. Do something you don't know how to do. And what I didn't know how to do was write like a whole story. And I thought that was kind of amazing when somebody says, do something you don't know how to do. I thought that was kind of like fun, right? And so that's how this that's the slow process over about 10 years how this little book came about. Yeah.
So I actually kind of want to build off of Dr. Loro's question. So in certain ways you have to change names, right?
Totally.
But how much do you worry while writing about other people, right? That the things that you write about those other people will be recognized or acted upon.
Yeah.
It's one thing to just be writing about yourself, but you can't write about yourself here without writing about other people.
Yeah. How much you were infinitely and ineffectually, I would say. Like, so as talking to a writing class recently, and someone asked me to like talk about the ethics of writing about people who are alive, and I was like, oh,
it is ethically indefensible in the last instance, period. Like, there is nothing ethically defensible about writing other people, even if they say it's fine, which it doesn't matter. Like, it's fine. So you're doing it because you want to do it, because you want to figure something out, because you want to make something beautiful, and that means that you're always worried about it. For me, I will say that I had really good friends. Again, when I was writing those little essays I was telling you about, they were being published at a journal called Avidly, and I have one friend in particular named Sarah Blackwood, who's a great scholar and editor, and she read everything I wrote very carefully. And her whole principle was like, I will not permit you to write anything that will one day be hurtful to those girls. And like, there's no guarantee that we got that right. There's no guarantee that your own calibrations will be the correct ones, but I really, so her sort of monitory voice was what I would think of, you know? So you do your best, but it's another weird thing about writing non-academic books. People are free to hate it, like genuinely hate it, and it's a good idea to be okay with that. So yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Is this your first non-academic focused writing book?
First whole book, it totally is. I mean, kind of like, yeah, yes. I used to write like introductions, you know, like Penguin books and stuff like that. You know, they have introductions, and those are really supposed to be designed for like the classroom. So you can't write like your academic prose, you have to write it in a more general way. But those are still about, those are about like Walt Whitman or Herman Melville or whatever. But this is the first one that like, you know, I gave to my uncle, and he was like, I'll read that. I like that one guy, he said. Like, I'm from a big East Coast Italian family. They're very lovely, they're very proud, they never read anything I wrote, which why would they? Who cares, you know? But this book they read. Yeah, so it's the first one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm having a hard time formulating this question, but can you talk about, I guess the question is, can you write critical prose about things you love? Because you mentioned that you have the same kind of attachment to both books and songs, like as a teenager, the kind of legend young have, and that you kind of fell in love with both of them. And I find it difficult sometimes to write critical prose about things I'm in love with, and I just wondered if you could speak to that issue of writing critically and writing about things that you love, and do you think that writing a book like this, and songs that you really love, will change the way that you write criticism?
That's a great question. I don't know about the future part, but for me, loving things, like like as soon as something like, I guess I'd say like, as soon as something like landed on me, I wanted to translate that sensation into words. Not necessarily as an act of criticism, but like as an act of friendship or love. Like, dude, did you hear that song? We should fight about that song. You know what I mean? Like, and that was just how I learned everything. Was like how I learned to like Whitman, how I learned to like Melville was like, I should talk about it with this person. I should talk about it with this person, and like turning it into language. And so love is a kind of shady word there because it mostly means like captivating. Super interested. It can also mean, as our colleague Professor Brian tells us, hating something. Can also produce like this affective energy that gets you to write. And so for me, I just found a lot of stuff like something that captivated me meant that I was engaged by it in a way that I didn't immediately have words for and why. And the finding adequate words was criticism. And I will say to like young people, like criticism for me was never the opposite of loving something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, kids come into your class like, why do we have to talk about this movie? You're going to ruin it. False. You're going to make it richer, thicker, and brighter, and better. Talking about things doesn't kill them. Talking about things with people you love, you know what I mean? When you see something awesome, you want to tell someone, I saw this thing. Why was it awesome? Well, because of this. I listened to this record. Why was it awesome? Because of this. You know, that's like my first instinct toward writing was really that. Like, I need a better language to describe why my friend Sandy, who I love so much, is so wrong about this band. And there's something about that that taught me like a little bit about what like criticism can be, you know what I mean? Though of course when you're doing criticism, you're responsible for a lot of different people, a lot of different voices, a lot of stuff like that. But it made me think that doing something like as esoteric as writing literary criticism could be fine.
be like a place where you could put your whole life. That was a nice thing to discover when I was a kid. Yeah,
So, you study the 19th century.
I did.
Right, it's a period when we have spiritual autobiographies, we have slave narratives, right? You have all of these autobiographies where people are just opening up their guts and saying, you know. I just wondered if your long experience of studying these genres, teaching these genres along with Melville and people, did that bleed over into your work at all, or inform the way that you tell your own life story?
I don't know, man, that's a really good question. I think I'm probably the least qualified to answer it, weirdly. Because like the hard thing was going from, like, I felt like I had the little essay, you know what I mean? Like I felt like I could do the thing, like, here's a song, here's a scene of life, here's their interchange, 3,000 words on it. What I didn't have was what that guy told me was like, write it as a story. And like some of you are creative writers and you're very gifted in this, like telling a story was like, what? You gotta think about plot and pacing and things like that. So it just presented itself to me as a series of formal problems. And I mean, the answer has gotta be like, of course. You know what I mean? If you spend your life immersed in this sort of stuff. But I wouldn't be the best person, because it didn't present me that way. It presented me like, I have a problem. This goes way too slow. This goes too fast. Nobody knows this person. You know? That was really the like, so you write something in a big rush and you're like, oh, it's got all my feelings in it. Nobody cares. Like it has to have like architecture and everything like that. You know? I wrote the whole thing and I gave it to my agent and he was like, oh, that's fantastic. I was so proud, you know? Wrote this thing, it's really long. I was like, I finished it. And the agent was like, oh man, it's so beautiful, I really love it. It's all wrong. I was like, what? He's like, it's not interesting. It's all about your sadness. Your sadness isn't interesting. Which is a terrible thing to say. You know, because I was like, actually, it's the only interesting thing? I was like, no. Anyway, he just said, like, that's not a story. You're being sad all the time is not a story. This book is not that. He was great. He said, that book, that's not this book. That book is like your friends and those girls. That's what this book is. Write that book. I was like, oh shit. I had to do it again. And then I had to figure out like a plot. Yeah. That's right.
I think Logan's had a question.
This seems a little similar to that question.
Yes.
But was there any specific difficulties with intentionally trying to distinguish your academic writing and then the, I guess, more casual writing? I just kind of said the sadness, but were there any like more?
I mean, I don't know. I read at a school in Iowa recently, and one student very kindly was like, "Dude, you talk very weird." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You talk like a book from the 19th century." And I was like, "Well, that's kind of how I talk." You know. So like, definitely like making an effort to sound more like a letter that I was writing to somebody than like a thing from an academic article. But no, the thing about writing academic essays is you just don't learn. You learn a lot of things, and it's awesome, but you don't learn things about like character. How much of this person do I need to show you and when? How should this develop? How is this passage going to hold somebody's interest? You know, because that was just I was trying to teach myself that on the fly, more or less successfully. I took a couple of nights. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, that's good. Yeah.
Well, I think.
Wait, I think there's one. No, you want?
Go in the back.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So, from a critical aesthetic perspective, I think Peter is the best record.
I don't disagree.
In my heart, basically, Filmmaker is my favorite Bugatti record, and I'm just curious if there's a difference from a critical perspective and it kind of, like in your heart, your favorite Bugatti record.
Young people, I wish you could see the people in the back row just nodding. Yeah. How about that? Honestly, you want to know? I just was never that interested. I just could never get that interested in Bugatti. I like more tuneful things. The thing that I left out of what scene I were finding out, they were like boys with rules,
Yeah.
and I hated them. And that was wrong. Like they had good rules. They were
It's
smart.
like good rules, like they only charge $5.
They only charged $5, and the boys couldn't hurt girls in the pit and everything. But I was just like, you know what? I don't need. I don't need more dudes telling me what is bad with rules. And Sandy was like, whatever. You don't have politics. So that was like, that's the whole substance of things, you know? I disliked how mistrustful they were of pleasure. You know, and Sandy was like, whatever, pleasure is just like, you just want pop consumption.
They are kind of moralists, too. I think you're right. Yeah.
Like, a concession for You see what I mean? Like, this was like, you could take up when you're 25 countless hours. That, like, no joke at all, this is like the texture of how I came to love that person who really did save my life. at this moment. Like, he really did absolutely come through for me. In this like ridiculous, huge, I had nothing to give to those guys when they came to visit me. I was a wreck. And it was just talking like this that was like the substance of how we chose it. So, yeah.
I'm going to close this out with one last question. I mean, you've just like, I feel like this is so, because it's a book about your life, it must feel so vulnerable maybe. So I'm going to ask you one further personal question, which I hope that you will answer honestly. How do you imagine that this is going to get optioned to be a movie?
Oh, man.
And who do you want to play the role?
You know the answer to this.
I don't know.
You know
I'm
the answer to
excited
this.
to hear the
You know the answer to this. There's one like, I'm a person from the 90s. Like, there's only, like, who is the pinnacle of all desirability and hotness?
Ethan Hawke.
That is what, no, it's Keanu, obviously. It's Keanu. It's Keanu. Keanu, who is like, okay, I can hear people like, yeah. No, it's never going to be optioned into a movie, but if it was, like, my whole, like, you're killing me. You're killing me. That's terrible. That's terrible. Who did I hate more in 1996 than Ethan Hawke?